Hello, my name is Jenny Larry Johnson, and welcome to this Virtual Learning Special Interest Group presentation. I am wanting to share with you the results and findings of a systematic literature review I conducted on online professional learning communities for K through 12 teachers. Again, my name is Jenny Larry Johnson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Creative Funding Solutions Incorporated. I am a workforce development specialist and bronze certified training evaluator. I have over 38 years of experience in training, performance improvement, human resource development, and human resource management. I have a Master of Science degree in learning technologies, that's the science of learning, from the University of North Texas. I'm currently a PhD student in that program, and I am a graduate mentor for UNT's Graduate Student Excellence Program. What we're doing is we're training tomorrow's teachers. Let's start by having a discussion about what are professional learning communities. Well, PLCs are formal or informal situations where like-minded professionals engage in collaborative learning. Collaborative learning does improve participants' knowledge, skills, and abilities. The research supports that. And PLC involvement can range from face-to-face mentoring sessions to small group workshops to large group presentations to interactive and virtual social media chats. The main thing I hope we can understand today is that PLCs are a rapidly growing global phenomenon. All right, now what does this mean for education and educators? Well, as we know, No Child Left Behind Act requires a comprehensive, sustained, and intensive approach to improving teachers' and principals' effectiveness. Okay, well, this means school districts are required to offer professional development programs that increase their teachers' ability to improve student learning outcomes. That's a great thing, right? So let's look at the probability of possibilities of online PLCs meeting that mark. The use of online PLCs for teacher professional development is gaining teacher support. Evidence also shows that teachers have reported benefits from collaborative engagement in online PLCs. Administrators also have reported that online PLCs offer a cost-effective alternative to traditional workshops and seminars. Now, based on these findings and other evidence, few would argue that online PLCs have the potential to create a paradigm shift for teacher professional development. Most, however, agree also that poorly designed, carelessly executed, or irrelevant online PLCs are a waste of the teacher's valuable time. So there is a need to take a closer look at the research to identify replicable models for online PLCs so that they can be used for wider application. I attempted to do this by conducting a systematic literature review of studies related to existing online PLCs for teachers. Okay, my literature review was designed to answer this question. Are online PLCs an effective alternative to traditional teacher professional development, workshops, and seminars? Okay, let's start with some definitions. Professional learning communities, or PLCs as they will be referred to throughout this presentation from this point, in the sense of the literature review, which was focused on American teachers, would be a group of educators that meet regularly, share expertise, and work collaboratively to improve their knowledge and skills together. Online professional learning communities, or PLCs, are those same PLC groups whose interactions are primarily conducted well, let's say at least 65% or more of the time online. I also would like to cover the three levels of research I review. The micro level of research examines the research participants engaged in activities. In this case, would be engaged in online PLCs. The meso level research would examine group interactions, infrastructures, and or institutional systems. In this context, I was looking at those studies that looked at how the teachers interacted among themselves, what type of PLC they used online, and or were there rules and regulations related to the group. There is also the macro level research that examines the organizational approach to online PLCs, including the culture of at school administration, their values, morals, and collective ideas as expressed through the studies I examined. Now let's get to the details of the systematic literature review that I conducted. I conducted the review between September and December of 2018. I used Cooper's taxonomy, which called for an exhaustive coverage of selecting criteria. And we'll talk a little bit more about the selection criteria in a moment. I searched for and examined macro, meso, and micro studies because I wanted to get a full feel for what the research community was saying about online PLCs, and again, directed toward teachers and American teachers. I collected and analyzed quantitative, qualitative, theoretical, and economic literature. I synthesized the results from large and small scale experiments separately and then collectively. And I use those results in my analysis to make inferences, conclusions, and recommendations. Noted by limitations during the study because, research, we'll talk more about those limitations a little later. Okay, let's get into the details. I limited my results, my search to the ERIC and Google Scholar databases. I use keywords and key search terms, including personalized learning communities, e-learning in America, teacher e-learning, online teacher communities, teacher online professional development, and teacher e-learning. After reviewing 555 abstracts, yes, all of them, I decided the search term online teaching community more closely aligned with what I wanted to examine. And there were 145 articles that returned under that search term. Now, the literature also let me know, my review of literature, that not all of the pieces should be included with the final review. For instance, there were 6 duplicates. There were 33 that veered off topic. And again, there were 54 that were not focused on U.S. teachers, which was the target population I wanted to study. And 11 were not available to me at the time. So that left me with 104. Now, of that 104 works, I really dug into them. Okay, is this good research? I evaluated them and ended up with 41 pieces of literature to look for. And basically, that was 55% that were micro-focused. If you remember micro-focus, that means that they studied the teachers' interactions among each other and within the PLCs. 25% were meso-focused. They looked at the structure, the platform, and the requirements for participation. 12% were micro-focused, where they looked at the school administrators' participation and perspective of the online PLCs. And 8% were seminal research pieces. Those were the theoretical pieces. People thinking about and studying the overall concept of online PLCs. I took those 41 pieces, I organized them in Microsoft Access, and then I coded them by classification. Okay, now this is a representation of the coding that I used. I gave the systematic literature reviews the highest order, and that was because they represented a compilation of studies, multiple studies, and I looked at 2 of those and examined those closely. I gave large-scale quantitative studies the next highest value because they used the numbers. They used statistically valid, in this case, reviews to quantify the results and support what they were finding. I gave quantitative small studies the next highest value for the same reason, but they had, in most cases, effect sizes that were not large enough to be statistically significant. I then rated qualitative large studies. Again, those were the ones that involved more than 35 participants because of the statistical significance of those. I looked at 4 of those. And then there were a number of small studies, 10 of those, and those involved less than 35 participants. The last on the list, well, not the last, but the others were like seminal theoretical, and there were really a couple of really good dissertation works that I looked at, and these are other people's opinions, not necessarily supported by data. And then the final look government economic report. This was a report that was sponsored by the Department of Education. And again, the hierarchy also was by classification. The macro levels, those are the ones where we're looking at the organizational impact with the highest value for me. The meso level, yeah, we want best practices inside of the infrastructure and systems that are currently in place. The micro level were the operational impact. Those are what the teachers are doing within those PLCs. And of course, theoretical, those are other people's opinions. Now, I ended up aligning the independent and dependent variables. And the reason I did that is I wanted to ensure that I was weighting and analyzing apples to apples, oranges to oranges. I next identified the mediators and the moderators because I wanted to see those factors. What factors influence those findings and the results? And then again, I analyze by impact and generalizability. I'm looking for those best practices, at least I was, and I am now, looking for those best practices that can be replicated based on a variety of conditions across multiple different types of situations, from rural to urban, from, gifted and talented to those students that struggle a little bit in their academics. Okay, let's talk about some of the findings or some of the results of my examinations. Again, I studied 7 large-scale quantitative studies and 2 small-scale quantitative studies. The composite effect size would represent 53 K through 12 teachers between those two, those 9 studies total. Most of the studies were based on self-report data. That means that they engaged the teachers, watched them, and then asked the teachers how they felt about everything. Most were micro-focused. They were looking at teacher participation and engagement within the online PLCs. And then I synthesized the findings first by large scale and then by small scale, and then, together as a whole as 9 studies. Overall, the quantitative studies did indicate or infer that the students recognized implied benefits from engagement in PLCs, online PLC communities. But when I looked at the qualitative studies, and let's talk about them, I looked at 4 large-scale studies. Again, more than 35 participants indicates that there's a possibility of a significant findings, and 11 small-scale studies. The total composite effect size on the qualitative studies was 1,464 K through 12 teachers, but I would like to mention that one of the large-scale studies was a district-wide, and it involved like 880 teachers, which may have influenced the results or the effect size significance. They again use self-report data. This is what the teachers are reporting on qualitative surveys and whatnot regarding their feelings about participations in the online environments. Most were micro-focused. What are the teachers doing in there? How do they feel about it? And the findings of the qualitative studies were a little bit more varied. For instance, even though overall the majority reported that their participation, they felt it was beneficial. Some of them said that they were participating for emotional support as opposed to purely for professional development and learning. There were a few that says I did not learn anything new. And there were a couple that says, look, I was just participating to go along with it. And I felt the need to conform. And that's what teachers will sometimes feel pressured to do. Now, I also looked at those mediators and moderators, as I mentioned earlier. I wanted to see what can positively or negatively impact the results of these studies. I found that there was a difference when the participation in the online PLCs were voluntary or mandatory. OJT time, on the job training time, where the administrators allowing the teachers to participate in these online activities within their schedule and giving them time for it. I looked at the hours. Well, the mediators and moderators, what are hours and levels of engagements? How long were the teachers allowed to participate in the PLCs? And or did the PLCs have requirements for engagement between certain hours? Administrative supports. Again, were the administrators willing to invest in substitutes or make other financial or support allowances for teacher participation? And the training durations. Were there standard periods of time or increments of time that were being monitored and examined to determine if the PLCs were effective? And I did find some instances of that. And of course, it always comes down to budgets. What were the investments? Did it cost anything for participation? Were any professional consultants paid to monitor and manage the PLCs? So those were mediators and moderators as well. The results and the implications. Well, what I found out that there were contradictory findings between the studies: qualitative, quantitative, large scale, small scale. There were conflicts in terminologies. Is it online learning? Is it e-learning? Is it distance learning? There seem to be differences in languages. There are gaps in research, and we'll talk a little bit more about the gaps in researches in a little bit. And there were limited research regarding those things that would point toward those replicable models that I was looking for. That was the meso, the systems, the infrastructures, the supports, the platforms, and also at the macro levels, what would administrators need to do in order to support online PLCs should they decide that this is an option, a viable option for their teachers? Okay, based on those implications, I came up with, some recommendations that I would make to make online PLCs more effective should administrators decide to pursue or examine it further. First of all, I would recommend that the gaps be closed in the research related to PLC groups, systems, infrastructure, and best practices. As I mentioned, there was not a lot on the meso research level. I also observed gaps in research related to the needed administrative supports, cost benefits of online training. I didn't see that weighted value of those cost and benefit analysis, online PLC compared to traditional training. And finally, I also recommend that the conflicts, the inconsistencies, the terminology differences, and all of those be examined, as well as maybe looking at some, additional type of data collection methods outside of self-report, which kind of put the teachers on the spot. So if we talked in more detail about the meso-level studies that I would recommend, that would be identification of best practices, models, and systems, Identification of infrastructure, that would be the software platform or online platforms, and media requirements. Can they do those on mobile phones? Group dynamics and engagement participation. I didn't really see a lot on that. At the macro or administrative level, I would like to see more about the impacts, measurable impacts of those administrative moderators and mediators, especially in terms of the policies, procedures, budget allowances, and supports. How do those impact teacher participation in online PLCs? Looking at the quantitative studies, I would like to see or I recommend more in the randomized controlled trial area. Let's allow those teachers to be autonomous and anonymous while they're participating so that we can get some real solid, valid, and reliable participation feedback. And let's look at ways to automate the data collection process. There are things like stealth assessments that can be embedded within those platforms to let us know exactly what's going on. Those are those analytics that are out there and available. And of course, whenever you're looking at qualitative data, you really want to look at those key statistical tools that we have to analyze qualitative data, including the innate, the chi-square, and the linear regression. I didn't see a lot of those, or enough, I should say. On the micro level, that's what the teachers are doing within the PLCs. Again, I would like to see some more anonymity. I would like to see open-ended questionnaires and validations of those questionnaires. This effect size on some of those studies were not large enough for it to be statistically significant enough to be. I know you're not supposed to generalize qualitative studies, but larger studies would have been able to allow us to see, okay, this may work under these circumstances. The strength in qualitative studies would be triangulation of the data, different locations, different regions, diverse samplings. I didn't find a lot of that within the study and the literature that I looked at. And of course, what I really wanted to see was more on synchronous or live participation versus asynchronous, which would be those content based online PLCs where the teachers could access 24/7 and just kind of casually browse through categories of information available to them. And I really didn't see a lot of literature on that within my limited systematic literature review. And finally, I think administrators could really benefit from more economic studies of data. Again, that's that cost benefit analysis, looking at costing models. What would it take to really implement a good, strong, effective online PLC for their teachers? I didn't find a lot of information on that. And of course, those budget supports. If you need to supplement or backfill those positions, would you need substitute teachers? For how long? How much would that cost? To the limitations, I would like to discuss, okay, keep in mind, my review, systematic review, was conducted within parameters. Okay, I was limited in the places that I searched for literature. I looked at UNT EBSCOhost and Google Scholar only. I limited those searches even to only those pieces that had been accepted, peer-reviewed, and published in the ERC database for validity and reliability. I only examined English works, and I only examined those works that dealt with U.S. teachers. There were some other studies that had yielded some of the results that I was looking for at the micro, meso, and macro levels, but they didn't focus on U.S. teachers. I only had 3 months to complete the entire research, and that was definitely a limitation. And finally, I worked alone. It was the perspective of one principal investigator. So that was a limitation in the fact that had I been involved with another investigator, maybe we could have, had some of my findings out. So please understand the disclaimer that this is my opinion based on what I read, and those recommendations are based on my background knowledge and history and experience with online learning. Now, I would like to kind of close with some emphasis based on, again, me and my position in this as an investigator. America must continue to fight to educate its children. Nobody's going to argue with that. What I would like us to rally around is that the K-12 classrooms, those are the key. That is where the battle is taking place. We have soldiers out there. We have soldiers out there that show up every workday and fight the good fight for us. Those are our teachers. But we have to give them the weapons that they need. They need those AK-47s, which are good research that leads to quality teacher professional development programs. We, as a body of knowledge, we have to dig deeper and arm our teachers with the best possible options for professional development possible. Again, my name is Jenny Larry Johnson. I'm with Creative Funding Solutions Incorporated. But if you would like to learn more about the information that was presented in this presentation, please reach out to your local virtual learning special interest group.